off a recurring live stream thing. Debated calling it a podcast, but it is going to be the Farm Talk podcast. And I'm going to do this at least every Tuesday at 4:15, 4:20 or so, which is when I get out of work. And I'm actually in a good location here where I can stream and I have good reception. So my goal is to do one of these streams every week and potentially more if you guys are interested in this. I would love to know if this is something that you'd like to see more of so that we can have a little more conversational back and forth type of videos rather than just sort of the classic YouTube video style. I know I enjoy being able to have conversations and be able to rant and rave occasionally when it is appropriate. This is not a podcast that's going to be available like on Apple or any other platforms. It's more of a short term podcast that is going to be, 15 to 20 minutes of whatever the topic of the podcast is each day. Today, we're going to be talking about Farmin' Ugly, the dirty truth of springtime on a small farm, and kind of combating some of the comparison and the challenges of trying to work through mud season up here in New Hampshire. And since we're on the topic of mud season, that looks different for different folks depending on where you are based out of. So I would be interested in hearing if anybody is in the chat, or if you are watching this later and you want to leave a comment. Let me know where you are watching from, because it's always curious to hear where folks are coming from. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the headwinds that I have been pushing here on the farm, and I would imagine that maybe some of you guys can relate to it in either farming or other areas of your life. And then kind of once we're about 15, 20 minutes deep, I'll start looking and seeing if we have comments, and we can start going back and forth a little bit with you guys who are here in the chat. And if you guys are watching this after, again, please feel free to drop stuff in the comments, because I'm always happy to respond to things after the fact. Now, in the springtime up here in New Hampshire, it is kind of a hot and cold, back and forth type of hope lash scenario, because you spend all winter trying to keep everybody relatively warm. And the reality is that things are pretty decent, even though it gets down quite chilly in the wintertime. A lot of times folks think that the hardest thing about the winter is the fact that it can get down below zero. That happens frequently, and raising livestock in sub-zero temperatures is not really the hard part. The hard part is kind of going into those temperatures and then coming out of those temperatures. It's those shoulder seasons where you really have to manage the health consequences. And if somebody's going to get sick, it's going to be when there's more moisture in the air and in the ground around, and that's going to be more challenging. But to me, the biggest thing that I feel like I'm pushing is the fact that it tends to be like demoralizing when you're looking at your farm and everything just looks like trash. And of course, the pigs, they don't care. They are just going all in, and they're doing everything in their power to, moonscape everything that they can get to. And then at the same time, I have pigs in the barn that need to have dry space to have their babies. Now, I'm happy that it's getting warmer, because that means plants are going to be coming back. We're going to have forage. Animals are going to be out on pasture. The feeding gets a lot easier. Everything gets better once things are warmed up. But the downside is all of that snow that we built up this winter, and this was a heavy snow year in New Hampshire. And guys, those of you who are in the chat, let me know. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, because I'm curious kind of who all I'm talking to and how foreign this is going to sound. Because if you're out of Alabama or Kentucky or Ohio, this may not be the same. Your mileage may vary a little bit. But happy to get warm weather coming in. But the downside, of course, is that a lot of what was solid and almost like concrete and dry throughout the winter, once the temperature starts to go up, that all turns to mud, and that can get really messy for a short period of time until it dries out. And then, of course, once it's dry outside, then the animals are able to go back out on the pasture. and they're able to find places where they can lay down, have their babies, and do that kind of thing. But space is at a big premium. And I put a short up this morning, actually, technically late last night, about one of the things that I had going on, because I have this one sow in the barn and she's right about ready to drop her babies, and she's in with the herd, and I've been trying to get her out of there, separate her out so that she can, get isolated and have her babies in a way that's going to be safe for her and the babies. You don't want your animals to be stressed out when they're trying to give birth. That's never a good thing. And so I've been trying to move her out of there, but of course she understands that this is something. Sorry for the technical difficulties. She understands that this is something that I am trying to do, and so immediately she decides now she doesn't want to come out of the barn, even though it is soggy and wet and it's really, really suboptimal where she is. Now she decides that she wants to just stay put and doesn't want to go through the gate. So I created sort of an ugly makeshift fencing setup there so I could move a porta hut into my courtyard there outside the barn. And like I said, I put this in the short that I released this morning. And, you know, I'm still struggling with that. As far as I know, and I'm going to find out when I get home from work here what the situation is if she managed to make it out of the barn. But to the best of my knowledge, last night I was out there till midnight, then getting up at 6 this morning to go to work. But at midnight, she was still in the barn. So she did not want to come out and get herself where she needed to be ultimately in order to have the babies, because in the summertime, being out on the pasture, she can go off wherever she wants in the pasture and find a spot. But at this time of the year, everything is still muddy and wet, so there aren't really dry spots available in the pasture. And so we're kind of limited to what is available in the immediate area surrounding there, and then trying to create some dry spots for them to have the babies. Now, I did get some good news while I was at work. My beautiful wife, Myra, sent me a picture of, I believe, 12 or 13 new piglets that we have that were just born. Super excited about that because this spring everybody wants piglets. And so every time that I think that, I've sold all the piglets and that's it, then I have another email. And guys, if this is your first time buying piglets, or if you are, buying piglets and this is something that you don't have a ton of experience with, the most basic recommendation I could make for buying spring piglets, at least in New England, is to buy them early and get ahead of everybody else so that you have your animals reserved in the fall, so that you don't get to this time of the year and then you're trying to find a breeder who's going to be able to provide you with the animals that you need. Because at this point, I really don't have much availability. I have an overflow list, because what I'm doing is I'm selling the anticipated, the kind of using some low numbers, saying if like I have 6 piglets a litter, and all my sows give me 6 piglets, and I sell those reservations based on those numbers, and then anything over that, then I can take that as part of my wait list, my overflow list. And right now, I'm still trying to get through the reservations and get those piglets out the door that have been reserved since the fall. And so juggling the bad weather and I mean, I guess technically it's not really bad weather. It's just inconvenient having the mud at the same time when I need my sows to be farrowing and they need dry areas in which to have their babies. But the whole point is that, farming is not always what you see on the label, the butter box at the store. It can be really discouraging, and I think this applies kind of to everywhere that you are, and you probably have heard this in relationship to social media specifically, but farming is no different in some ways. That comparison is the thief of joy, and the things that you're trying to do and the things that you want to accomplish, there's a certain point where you can get too much in your head and beating yourself up over the fact that it doesn't look the way that somebody else's setup looks and it doesn't look as pretty as you want it to, or the way that you had those pictures when you first got it. And there's a lot of different things where you can kind of get in your head and kind of go into a very unproductive place in terms of your thought processes. And so I want to encourage you guys that if this is something that you're dealing with at this time of the year, well, number one, I would love to hear what you guys have found that works to deal with this, because at the end of the day, for me, a lot of it just comes down to desperation and not wanting my animals to suffer. So I try to do the best I can to keep them comfortable and happy. But uh, a lot of the time, it's just putting your head down and slogging through it in order to get to those moments where you have beautiful green grass on the pasture and you get the piglets running through the field and everything is pretty. And those are the moments that make it worthwhile. But there's a lot of moments in leading up to that where everything is muddy and you got mamas that are trying to have their babies and everything is a big mud pie and you can't really find a dry area to bed them down, and you have to just kind of keep going and keep working and keep trying to keep everything as clean and do the best you can and cobble things together the best you can with the materials at hand. And certainly there's, a lot of options to improve things and improve infrastructure, but I think that one of the things I've had to learn is to be willing to make ugly stuff that works when the situation calls for it. And so like the short that I posted last night about the fencing, I cobbled together a couple of hog panels and a 6x6 and a 4x4, and none of it was really set up properly to withstand true abuse by the hogs, but it was set up well enough to where it's getting the job done. At least the last that I have seen and heard, it seems to be getting the job done. Hopefully, it continues to do that. But willingness to depart from a nice, clean, squared away fence and just say, look, this is the best I can nail together right now, and it's going to keep the animals in long enough for me to get the mama out into a area where she has a little bit of better area that's a little bit more dried off, and we can work with that. And it's I mean, maybe this is just something, maybe I'm a nutcase and I'm the only one who deals with this, but I tend to struggle with things not being perfect. I want them to be clean, I want them to be dry, and when I see somebody else's video on YouTube and they have like a farrowing pen where everything is like clean with fresh sawdust and it's beautiful, and I start kicking myself in the ass thinking about like, well, why can't I do that? Why can't mine be like that? And the reality is there's certainly infrastructure improvements that I have to do on my property, and there's always things that can be better. But in the meantime, we have to kind of keep our chin up and keep going so that the animals are going to be able to have the best shot at doing things. And farming, ultimately, this is what we sign up for when we're doing this. And these are things that I was blissfully unaware of until I started farming. And maybe that's part of the reason why I'm on here on YouTube trying to encourage other people to do this, is because I would like to think that we can have more people to commiserate, who can appreciate the monumental psychological effort that is involved with competing with weather and animals at every turn, not to mention market and government forces that are always trying to beat you down, in order to be able to have fresher, better food that is more recognizable rather than the junk that is being pushed by the food industry. And I don't know if I'm the only one who feels that way, but the food industry is, I guess, on some level, a necessary evil because it's part of how most of us live. But I think that's a big impetus on my part for wanting to do this and wanting to encourage other people to do this. And one of the catchphrases and the things that I've come up with for this channel is "Make America Farmers Again," because of the fact that farming has been a massive education for me, not just an exercise in self-sacrifice, but also just an exercise in how the world works. That the business side of it and having to deal with weather and really understand time management and patience differently is a very useful thing that I know is applicable in many other areas of life. So Anywho, that is about 15 minutes or so in. So I wanted to see if you guys have any questions, any stuff that you guys are dealing with. Doesn't necessarily have to be related to the topic specifically, um, but I'm open to take some questions if anybody wants to talk farming or anything else that is tangentially related. And while I'm waiting for questions to come in, I will announce that we did just get chickens, which will be here in the next couple of days. So I am not a big bird guy, not a poultry connoisseur, but I was convinced earlier in the winter time when end of March, early April seemed a long ways off that it might be a good idea to get some little ones, and so we got chicks coming. So that's going to be added to the mix in addition to the pigs. Initially, when we started the farm, the goal was to run the pigs and the chickens together and have sort of co-species cohabitation there on the pasture. But the fencing requirements for chickens are very different from the fencing requirements for pigs, and they're not able to kind of play together in terms of the fencing. So I wound up having some issues with my chickens visiting my neighbor's yard, and he really did not appreciate that at all. And so that kind of created a little bit of drama. And that's something that you know when you're raising animals, depending on where you are, some areas of the country are more litigious, and certainly different parts of town, and a lot of it just comes down to who your neighbors are. Your ability to maintain the good graces of the people around you and your neighbors becomes ever more obviously important. And so you want to make sure that your livestock is managed in a way that doesn't create more enemies for you than would otherwise, be necessary. So, but anyways, guys, I am going to end the stream here in the next couple of minutes. I am going to go home. I have animals to feed. I got some little piglets. I have a video coming up. Probably will post that video tomorrow, talking about how I got into raising pigs in the first place. If anybody's kind of wondering, kind of what was my intro to raising pigs, what did that look like? I'm happy to share at least a little bit of that with you. I initially shot a video that was like 25 minutes long, and then my wife helped me cut that down to a more manageable length so that everybody is not being bored by my rambling for too long. So it moves a little bit better. And you can hear about when I brought my first pigs home, piglets, and I lost all of them within the first 10 minutes, and they all ran off to my neighbors up and down the road. And it was a real mess, and was a good lesson learned that has kind of helped me remember that things can always get worse. And so you got to kind of have a little bit of humor and laugh about things, and try to remember why you're doing it in the first place, and not get too carried away with the comparisons, and not get too dragged down by the challenges that you're facing at any given time, because there's always going to be more challenges, and that's just baked into the cake if we're doing anything with animals. And frankly, if you're doing anything that is worth doing, I don't think that this is really about farming as such. This is about doing anything that requires anything of you, anything that is challenging. There's always going to be these ups and downs, and times when everything looks really lousy. And the ability to just kind of knuckle down and keep going is what separates those that have a level of success from those who kind of don't. And there's also a point at which you have to know when to stop throwing good money after bad, and you say, hey, this is the plan, and we're gonna go a different direction as well. And I was kind of thinking about just doing a video today telling everybody that I was going to quit farming, just because it's April 1st. Thought I might do an April Fool's type of thing, but I said, you know what, this is my first proper podcast with the title of a podcast, live stream type of thing. So if this is something you guys want to see more of, by all means, please do subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more of these, if you have questions, topics you want to kick around, and that maybe you think I should discuss. I would love to get ideas and feedback from you guys as well. And we're going to run with those every week, every Tuesday at 4:20. And again, that number is not necessarily chosen for any specific reason. It just happens to be when I get out of work and I have the opportunity to do a little stream here. So, all right, guys, I think I'm going to wrap it there. If you guys have any other questions or comments, please drop them below, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you on the next video.